My daughter asked me to raise a glass at my wife's memorial dinner. Then my 9-year-old granddaughter slipped a napkin into my hand and whispered, "Grandpa, do not drink the golden cider. Mom says the drops make you sweet and easy before you sign." I looked down. On the napkin, in a child's crooked handwriting, were 4 words. Grandma did not fall. For a moment, the whole dining room kept moving around me like nothing had happened. Forks touched china. Candles trembled in their glass holders. Someone laughed too loudly near the fireplace. My daughter Grace stood at the far end of the table in a black silk dress, smiling at 28 people who believed she was still grieving her mother. My son-in-law Nolan had one hand resting on the back of my chair. The glass of cider sat in front of me. Warm. Amber. Sweet enough to smell from where I sat. And my granddaughter Emma stood beside me with her eyes lowered, pretending to fix the ribbon on her dress. Children do not write sentences like that unless someone has taught them fear. They do not say "do not drink" unless they have watched something happen after you did. They do not write "Grandma did not fall" unless the adults in their house have been lying so badly the truth starts leaking through the smallest person in the room. I was 72 years old that night. I had buried my wife, Margaret, 11 months earlier after what everyone called a tragic accident on the back staircase of our old house in Vermont. A fall. A broken neck. A doctor's soft voice. A daughter crying into my shoulder. A minister telling me the Lord calls people home when we least expect it. That was the story I had accepted because grief had left me too tired to fight the walls around it. But that night, at a memorial dinner my daughter had organized in my wife's name, my granddaughter placed 4 words in my palm and cracked the whole lie open. Before this is over, I will tell you how I found the real will hidden inside a piano bench, how my daughter used a fake elder care charity to steal from 7 families, how my son-in-law planned to lock me inside a memory care facility before Monday morning, and how I let them believe I was too confused to stop them. I will also tell you what happened when they tried to make me sign away $8.7 million in front of the entire town. They thought the old man was finished. They thought grief had made me soft. They thought a few drops in cider could turn me into a signature. They were wrong. My name is Henry Whitaker. I spent 38 years as a county auditor in New Hampshire. That means I was never the loudest man in any room. I was the one who noticed when a decimal moved. I was the one who asked why a vendor invoice used the wrong post office box. I was the one who remembered that a school roof repair from March should not be billed again in October under a different contractor name. Fraud rarely arrives wearing a mask. It arrives as paperwork. It arrives as a friendly explanation. It arrives with a clipboard and a smile and just enough urgency to make honest people feel rude for slowing it down. I knew that. I had built a whole career on knowing that. And still, when the fraud came through my own front door wearing my daughter's face, I missed it. That is the part one still carry. Not the money. Not even the humiliation. The blindness. Because strangers are easier to distrust. Family walks through places inside you that locks were never built to guard. Margaret used to tell me that was both the beauty and the danger of love. She was right about most things. Annoyingly right. Lovingly right. She was a librarian for 41 years. Not the quiet kind people imagine. Margaret was small, gray-haired, and capable of terrifying full-grown men who tried to return books with coffee stains and excuses. She believed every town needed 3 things. A library. A place for children to sit safely after school. And at least one old woman who was not afraid to ask inconvenient questions. By the time she retired, she had become all 3. She ran the town book club. She kept a spare key to half the houses on our road. She checked on widows after storms. She helped teenagers write college essays. She argued with select board members until they funded ramps for the community center. When people talk about a good woman after she dies, they usually flatten her into kindness. Margaret was kind, yes. But she was not soft. She could smile while taking a liar apart one sentence at a time. I loved that about her. I loved it before I understood how much I would need it after she was gone. Our daughter Grace had always wanted life to look polished from the outside. That was not a crime. A lot of people want that. She liked clean countertops, matching guest towels, correct flowers, good lighting, the kind of holiday cards where every person looks slightly less human and more arranged. As a girl, she was bright and disciplined. She wanted prizes. She wanted rules. She wanted to be the child teachers described as exceptional. Margaret used to say Grace had a gift for excellence and a fear of being ordinary. I heard only the first half. Mothers hear the whole sentence. Grace married Nolan Pike when she was 31. He was handsome in the smooth expensive way that makes people assume success arrived before character had to be tested. Real estate development. Private capital. Historic restoration. Consulting. He used many words for buying old things, squeezing them, and selling the story back to people with more money than memory. I did not dislike him at first. I just never trusted the way he paused before answering simple questions. A man with nothing to hide does not need to polish every sentence before he lets it out. Margaret saw more. One Sunday after dinner, while Grace and Nolan were loading Emma into the car, Margaret stood by the kitchen window and said, "He studies people for use." I laughed because I thought she was being dramatic. She turned to me and said, "You always laugh right before you learn I was correct." She was right again. Emma was born the next year. That little girl changed all of us. She had Grace's dark hair, Nolan's chin, and Margaret's habit of staring at adults as if they were books with missing pages. She was not loud. She watched. She listened. She remembered. By 6, she knew which neighbors had dogs, which neighbors had bad knees, and which neighbor gave out full-size candy bars on Halloween. By 8, she had started slipping notes into books she thought people needed. A sad neighbor got Charlotte's Web. A boy with a broken arm got Treasure Island. A woman who yelled too much got a book about breathing. Margaret said Emma had the family disease. Trying to rescue people with paper. The year before Margaret died, she changed her will. I did not know that then. I knew she was working on something called the Whitaker Reading House. It was her dream. We owned a large old property at the edge of town, a former carriage house and 3 acres behind it. It had belonged to my aunt, then passed to me. For years it had been storage, old furniture, boxes of holiday decorations, tools I kept saying I would organize and never did. Margaret wanted to turn it into a free community reading house for children, older people, and anyone who needed a warm place to sit. Not a full library. Something smaller. More human. A place with soup on winter afternoons. Large print books. Homework tables. A legal help desk once a month for seniors who did not understand paperwork their children asked them to sign. That last part mattered to her. More than I realized. She kept saying older people lose things in silence. Homes. Bank accounts. Medication control. The right to decide where they sleep. Not always to strangers. Often to family. I heard her. But I did not fully hear her. There is a difference. After she died, Grace said the reading house dream was too painful to discuss. She said the property needed to be protected until I was emotionally stable enough to decide what to do. She said Nolan knew developers who could evaluate it. She said nothing had to happen right away. That was how she spoke then. Soft. Measured. Always reasonable. Grief makes reasonable people sound like shelter. So I let her handle things. I let her speak to the attorney. I let her organize Margaret's papers. I let her choose which boxes were too painful for me to open. I let her help with bills. I let Nolan review insurance. I let myself become what they needed me to be. A tired widower. A grateful father. A man who did not want another fight. Then came the invitation. Grace had purchased an old seaside inn in Maine with Nolan. Not a giant place. 18 rooms. Gray shingles. White porch. A view of the water that looked expensive even before anyone named the price. She said they wanted to host a memorial dinner for Margaret there, small and tasteful, with family friends, donors, and a few people from the Literacy Foundation. A final honor, she said. A beginning, she said. I almost said no. But she put Emma on the phone. Please come, Grandpa, Emma said. Mom says Grandma liked the ocean even though she hated sand in her shoes. That was true. Margaret hated sand in her shoes with theological conviction. So I said yes. I drove up on a Friday in late September. 5 hours from my house. Trees turning copper and red along the highway. A hard bright sky. Radio off because every song seemed to belong to a version of my life I could no longer enter. By the time I reached the coast, the air had changed. Salt. Cold wind. Wet stone. The sharp cry of gulls overhead. The inn sat at the end of a narrow road above the harbor. Grace had named it the Lantern House. Of course she had. It looked like a magazine had been told to imagine grief with good lighting. White pumpkins on the steps. Dried hydrangeas in copper pots. Warm lamps in every window. A black ribbon tied around the front door handle in Margaret's memory. I parked beside Nolan's black Range Rover and sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. I could see my daughter through the front windows. Moving fast. Giving instructions. Smiling at someone with a clipboard. Then I saw Emma upstairs in a window. She was looking down at me. Not waving. Just looking. When a child sees a grandparent after months apart, she usually lights up. Emma did not. She pressed one hand to the glass, then disappeared. That was the first wrong thing. The second came before I even reached the porch. An older woman stepped out from the side garden carrying a basket of folded linens. She had white hair pinned low, square shoulders, and the kind of face that had spent decades refusing nonsense without raising its voice. She saw me and stopped so suddenly the basket shifted in her hands. "Henry Whitaker," she said. I knew that voice. It took me a second. Then 20 years folded in on itself. Beatrice Lane. Her mouth tightened. "You remember. Court stenographer. Hillsborough County. You typed faster than people lied." That almost made her smile. Almost. She looked over her shoulder toward the inn. "Do not sign anything here," she said quietly. I blinked. What? Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not if Grace cries. Not if Nolan explains. Not if a doctor says you are tired. Before I could answer, the front door opened. Grace appeared with both arms spread and a smile that landed half a second too late. "Dad." Beatrice lowered her eyes, adjusted the linens, and walked past me like she had said nothing at all. Grace came down the steps and hugged me hard. Too hard. A performance of warmth can bruise. "You made it," she said into my shoulder. I did. She pulled back and studied my face. "You look exhausted." "I drove 5 hours." "I know. I just worry." Nolan came out behind her. Cashmere sweater. Perfect stubble. That calm public smile men like him wear when they want the room to know they own the temperature. "Henry," he said, taking my bag before I offered it. "Welcome to Lantern House. It's something." He laughed. "We still have work to do, but Grace has a vision." Grace smiled at him. That look passed between them. Small. Fast. Practiced. I had seen it in auditors' offices when 2 employees knew which drawer held the bad file. But I told myself not to be suspicious. A widower can turn into a detective of his own loneliness if he is not careful. Inside, the inn smelled of beeswax, cedar, and expensive candles trying to pretend they were old wood. Grace led me through the entry hall. She pointed out restored floors. Old beams. Framed photographs of the harbor. A sitting room where Margaret's portrait had been placed on an easel surrounded by white roses. I stopped in front of it. It was the photo from her 68th birthday. Margaret laughing at something just out of frame, one hand lifted like she was about to tell me to stop taking pictures. The room blurred. Grace touched my arm. I thought this one captured her. It did. Her fingers tightened slightly. "Tonight will be beautiful." That was the third wrong thing. A memorial should be honest. Not beautiful first. They put me in a room on the second floor facing the harbor. Nolan said I should rest before dinner. Grace said she would bring up warm cider. I said coffee would be fine. She laughed softly. "Dad, coffee after 5 keeps you awake." "I am 72, Grace. Everything keeps me awake." Her smile held. "Cider then." I did not argue. That was another mistake. A small one. But small mistakes are how large traps test the door. I unpacked slowly. 2 shirts. One dark suit. Margaret's old silver tie clip because I could not make myself attend her memorial without bringing something she had touched. Outside my window, the harbor rolled gray under a bruised sky. Boats rocked in their slips. Gulls circled. A church bell rang somewhere in town. I was buttoning my shirt when I heard voices in the hall. Grace first. He cannot be difficult tonight. Nolan answered too low for me to catch. Then Grace again. Emma already said too much last week. I moved closer to the door. Their footsteps faded. Emma already said too much. I stood there with one cuff unbuttoned, listening to the emptiness after them. That was when the unease stopped being vague. At 6:30, Grace brought the cider. It came in a porcelain cup with a cinnamon stick and a thin orange slice floating at the top. There, she said. Margaret used to make it this way. No, she did not. Grace blinked. What? Your mother hated cinnamon sticks in drinks. Said they looked like wet kindling. For half a second, annoyance showed. Then it vanished. You're right, she said softly. I forgot. She had not forgotten. Grace remembered everything that helped her. I took the cup because refusing it felt like accusing her. That is how these things work. The first prison is politeness. The cider was sweet. Too sweet. Under the apple and honey was a strange green bitterness. Not strong. Just enough to make my tongue notice and my mind dismiss it. Grace watched me drink. Not openly. But she watched. Then she said, Nolan invited Dr. Avery for dinner. He helped after Mom passed. Very kind man. I do not need a doctor at dinner. Of course not. He is just a friend. Doctors who appear as friends at family dinners rarely remain friends by dessert. I should have poured the cider into the sink the moment she left. I did not. By the time I went downstairs, my head felt warm and slightly distant. Not drunk. Not dizzy exactly. Just softened at the edges. The dining room had been staged perfectly. Long table. White candles. Place cards. Margaret's portrait at one end. A small card beside each plate with one of her favorite book quotes printed in gray ink. People stood when I entered. Some hugged me. Some squeezed my shoulder. Some spoke in the careful voices people use around recent grief, even when the grief is nearly a year old and still somehow new every morning. I saw Dr. Avery immediately. Late 50s. Silver hair. Soft hands. A tie with tiny blue anchors. He shook my hand and held it too long. Henry, Grace has told me so much about you. I wish I could say the same. Nolan laughed before deciding whether it was funny. Grace's eyes flicked to him. Dinner began. Soup. Salad. A fish course Margaret would have criticized privately but eaten politely. Toasts. Stories. Soft laughter. And always, refills. Cider. Water. Wine I did not ask for. Every time my glass lowered, someone filled it. Beatrice moved quietly along the wall with a tray, working as if she were only staff. But twice, when she passed behind Grace, she looked at me. Not with pity. With warning. Then Emma appeared beside my chair. I had not seen her come in. She wore a navy dress with a white collar and a red ribbon tied at her wrist. Margaret had given her that ribbon. I remembered because Margaret said every child needs at least one ridiculous keepsake adults cannot explain. Emma leaned close as if kissing my cheek. Instead, she pushed the folded napkin into my palm and whispered, "Do not drink the golden cider." Then she stepped back. I opened the napkin under the table. Mom says the drops make you sweet and easy before you sign. Grandma did not fall. I felt my heart change pace. Not faster. Heavier. Like each beat had to move through stone. At the far end of the table, Grace lifted her glass. Before dessert, I want to thank everyone for honoring my mother's memory tonight. Nolan stood beside her holding a folder. Of course he had a folder. Grace continued. Mom believed in community. In care. In legacy. And because Dad has had such a hard year, Nolan and I have been helping him think about how best to preserve what she loved. People turned toward me with warm expressions. I sat with my granddaughter's note hidden under my hand. Nolan opened the folder. We will share details tomorrow, but the Whitaker Reading House project is entering a new phase. A protected phase. One that allows Grace to carry Margaret's dream forward while giving Henry the peace and support he deserves. Peace and support. I had audited enough theft to know language can wear perfume. I looked at my daughter. She smiled at me with wet eyes. Not real tears. Useful tears. Then Dr. Avery leaned toward the woman beside him and said softly, just loud enough for me to hear, transitions are hardest when insight begins to fluctuate. Insight. Fluctuate. The room tilted slightly. Not from emotion. From the cider. I knew it then. Not the whole thing. But enough. I set my glass down. Grace saw. Nolan saw. Beatrice saw. And Emma, standing near the hallway with both hands folded in front of her, looked at me like a child waiting to learn whether truth had arrived too late. It had not. Not yet. I did not confront them that night. That surprises some people when I tell the story. They imagine truth should turn a table over. They imagine a father should stand, point at his daughter, and demand an answer in front of witnesses. That is satisfying in the mind. It is usually useless in real life. If I had accused Grace at that dinner, she would have cried. Nolan would have called me overwhelmed. Dr. Avery would have spoken gently about stress responses, complicated grief, and possible cognitive strain. The guests would have remembered my shaking hand more than my words. And Emma, my brave little granddaughter, would have gone home with the two people she had just exposed. So I did the hardest thing an angry man can do. I stayed quiet. I lifted my water glass instead of the cider and listened while they performed concern. Grace talked about Margaret's values. Nolan talked about stewardship. Dr. Avery talked about dignity in transition. That phrase got applause from a retired school board member who had no idea he was clapping for a trap. After dessert, Grace came to my chair. You barely touched the cider. My stomach is off. Her face softened too quickly. Dad, you should have said something. I am saying it now. Dr. Avery appeared beside her like he had been waiting for the cue. Henry, may I check your pulse? No. The word came out sharper than I intended. The nearby conversations dimmed. Grace lowered her voice. Dad. I said no. For 1 second the room saw it. Not all of it. Just a flash. The old man being difficult. The daughter trying. The doctor concerned. Nolan stepped in, smooth as polished stone. Long drive. Emotional night. Let's get you upstairs. I could have resisted. Instead I let him take my elbow. Not because I needed help. Because I wanted to know how he handled a man he thought was weak. The answer was carefully. Too carefully. His fingers rested just above my wrist. Not supporting. Controlling. At the stairs, Emma stood in the hallway holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. She looked at me. I gave her the smallest nod I could. Her shoulders dropped just a little. That nod was a promise. I did not yet know if I could keep it. Grace walked me to my room. Nolan followed. Dr. Avery did not come upstairs, but I heard his voice below talking to someone about protective planning. Grace turned down the bed like I was a guest in a hospital, not an inn. I am fine, I said. We know. Nolan said it before Grace could. We know. Not I know. We. That small word mattered. People reveal alliances in pronouns. Grace picked up my cider cup from the bedside table. You finished more than I thought. I spilled some in the bathroom. She froze. Only for a second. But I saw it. Nolan saw me see it. Then he smiled. Good man. Hydration is overrated. He made jokes the way a dog shows teeth. When they left, I locked the door. Then I took Emma's napkin from my pocket and read it again under the lamp. Mom says the drops make you sweet and easy before you sign. Grandma did not fall. There was one more mark at the bottom I had missed. A small drawing of a piano. Just 3 crooked black keys and a little bench. I sat down slowly. Margaret had owned a piano. An old upright in our Vermont house. She never played well. That did not stop her. Every Christmas she would play carols with the grim confidence of a woman who believed wrong notes were a form of participation. After she died, Grace said the piano was too heavy to move and too painful to keep. She arranged storage. I never asked where. I never asked anything. I slept in pieces that night. Not real sleep. More like falling into short dark holes and climbing back out with my heart pounding. At 3 a.m, I heard footsteps outside my door. Light. Small. Then a soft scratch. I went to the door and opened it. Emma stood there in pajamas, barefoot, holding a book against her chest. "What are you doing up?" I whispered. She looked down the hall. "Mom checks at 6. "For what?" "To see if the cup is empty." My mouth went dry. I stepped aside and she slipped into the room. She moved with the speed of a child who had practiced being silent. That hurt more than anything she could have said. I closed the door. She handed me the book. It was Margaret's old copy of Little Women. The spine was cracked. The cover worn soft. The corners rounded by decades of hands. "Grandma said if things got bad, I should give you this." "When did she say that?" Emma pressed her lips together. "Before the stairs." I sat on the edge of the bed. My knees suddenly felt unreliable. "Emma, what happened before the stairs?" Her eyes filled. "Mom said I am not supposed to remember. Children say terrible things cleanly. They have not learned to wrap pain in softer cloth." I opened the book. A library card sleeve was glued inside the back cover. Margaret had written something on the card in her neat slanted handwriting. "Henry, if Emma gives you this, believe her first and ask questions second. Beatrice knows where the music went." My throat closed. Beatrice knows where the music went. The piano. The bench. Emma watched me read it. "Grandma said you would understand." "I am trying." "She said you think slowly when you are sad, but you get there." I almost laughed. Almost. That was Margaret exactly. Even from the grave, she could insult me with love. I looked at Emma. "Did your grandmother tell you not to trust your mother?" Emma flinched. Not at the question. At the word mother. "No. She said if grown-ups make secrets feel heavy, I should find the person who makes them lighter. And that person is me." She nodded. Then whispered, "I think Mom knows Grandma hid something." "What does she think it is?" "Papers." "What kind?" "The kind that makes her angry." That was a child's answer and a perfect one. Anger points at value. "Emma," I said carefully, "what drops was your mom talking about?" She looked toward the door again. "In the brown bottle. The one that says sleep flower, but it isn't flour. Dr. Avery brings it. Mom says just enough makes you agreeable. Nolan said too much makes paperwork messy." I could feel my face change. I turned away for a second so she would not see all of it. Paperwork messy. Not dangerous. Not cruel. Messy. That told me how they thought. It told me everything. "Have they given it to you?" She shook her head fast. "No. Only you. And Grandma." The room disappeared for a moment. Not physically. But something inside me stepped away from the present and stood at the foot of the staircase where Margaret had died. "Only you. And Grandma." I had believed in a fall. An accident. A bad step in the night. Now I could smell cider and hear Grace saying Mom was restless before bed. I could hear Nolan saying older houses have dangerous stairs. I could hear Dr. Avery at the funeral telling me sedatives sometimes leave older adults disoriented after loss, even if he had supposedly met Margaret only once. I had not noticed that contradiction then. Grief had made an honest fool of me. Emma touched my sleeve. "Grandpa?" I came back. "Yes. Are you mad at me?" That nearly split me open. "No. Never. Mom said if I confuse you, it could make your brain worse." I knelt so I could look at her directly. "My brain is not the problem." She studied my face. Then she nodded once. Like Margaret would have. There are bloodlines that run deeper than names. A floorboard creaked in the hall. Emma went rigid. I put the book under the pillow and stood. Bathroom, I whispered. She understood instantly. Too instantly. She slipped into the bathroom and shut the door halfway. A knock came. Soft. Dad? Grace's voice. I opened the door with my best annoyed old man expression. What? She stood in the hallway wearing a robe, hair loose around her face. No makeup. Still composed. I heard you moving. I am allowed to move. Of course. I just worry. That line again. I almost hated the word worry by then. She looked past me into the room. Are you alone? No. I invited the harbor band. Her mouth tightened. Sarcasm had always bothered Grace because it could not be arranged nicely. You seem agitated. I seem awake. Dad. She stepped closer. I did not move. For one moment we stood there, father and daughter, and I understood that whatever love still existed between us had become trapped behind something colder. Then water ran in the bathroom. Grace's eyes flicked toward the sound. I yawned loudly. You planning to supervise that too? She looked back at me. No. Get some sleep. She walked away. I waited until her door closed at the other end of the hall before letting Emma out. The poor child was shaking. I wrapped her in my arms. She stood stiff at first. Then collapsed against me. Listen to me, I whispered. You did the right thing. If Mom finds out, she'll send me to Ridgefield. What is Ridgefield? A school. Nolan says girls with big imaginations need structure. There it was. The child's cage had a name too. Emma, look at me. She did. You are not going to Ridgefield. Promise? I wanted to say yes immediately. But promises to children should be treated like glass. You do not hand one over unless you can carry its weight. So I said, I promise I will fight that with everything I have. She accepted that. Children know the difference between comfort and truth. At 4:15, I walked her back to her room. The hallway was silent. Her door had a small brass star hanging from the knob. Inside, I saw shelves of books, a window seat, and a desk with all the pencils sharpened to the same length. Too organized for a child. On the desk sat a little wooden box. The lid was open. Inside were folded slips of paper. What are those? I whispered. Things I am not supposed to say. I stared at her. She seemed embarrassed. Grandma said words can get sick if you leave them inside too long. I nodded because I did not trust myself to speak. She climbed into bed. Before I left, she said, Beatrice comes before breakfast. She knows the back stairs. The back stairs. The place Margaret died. I closed Emma's door and stood in the hallway until my hands stopped shaking. Then I went back to my room, took out Margaret's book, and read the message again. Believe her first and ask questions second. I had spent my life asking questions first. Maybe that was why Margaret had written it that way. By sunrise, I knew 3 things. My wife had been afraid before she died. My granddaughter had inherited enough courage to risk telling me. And my daughter was planning to make me sign something very soon. At 7, Beatrice knocked once and entered without waiting. She carried towels over one arm and a tray with coffee in the other hand. Real coffee. Black. No cinnamon. No honey. No orange slice. She closed the door with her foot. You saw the note. I held up Little Women. Her face changed. Not surprise. Sorrow. She gave it to the child. You knew. I knew Margaret was scared. Of Grace? Beatrice looked toward the hall. Of what Grace had become. That distinction hurt. A person is easier to hate when you do not remember who she used to be. Beatrice set the coffee down and sat in the chair by the window as if she had every right to be there. Maybe she did. How are you here? I asked. Grace hired me through a staffing agency 3 months ago. She did not recognize my married name. Lane was from the courthouse. I use Keller now. I came because Margaret asked me to watch if anything happened to her. When? For days before she died. The words landed hard. I sat. Beatrice continued. She called me from the library office. Said she found irregularities in the Reading House Trust. Said Grace and Nolan had been moving paperwork through something called Harbolite Senior Care. She thought it was just a conflict of interest at first. Then she found other names. What other names? Older people. Families. Properties transferred under care agreements. Money routed through shell vendors. Doctors' letters attached to competency concerns. It looked legal if you did not look long enough. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Paperwork. She asked me to come by the next morning, Beatrice said. I was sick that night. Fever. Could barely stand. I told her I would come the day after. Her voice flattened. She died before I got there. I looked up. Where is the piano? In storage under the chapel. What chapel? Beatrice pointed across the harbor through the window. The little white church sat above the main road, steeple rising against the gray morning. Lantern Chapel. Nolan bought the old building as part of the inn package. Uses it for weddings now. The piano is downstairs in the old Sunday school room. Can we get to it? Yes. But not in daylight. Grace has staff setting up there for tonight's donor breakfast. Donor breakfast? Beatrice's mouth tightened. You have not been told. No. Tomorrow morning, Grace plans to announce the new structure for Margaret's reading house. She will say you are stepping back. She will say you asked her to take control of the trust. I did no such thing. No. But Dr. Avery will say you should not carry administrative stress. Nolan will present a transition document. They will want you to sign it after breakfast in front of witnesses. Witnesses. That word mattered. They wanted the signature to look supported by community. Not hidden. Public kindness can launder private theft. I took a breath. What is in the document? I have not seen the final version. But I heard enough. Durable power of attorney. Trust management transfer. Medical proxy language. Grace as primary. Nolan as financial administrator. Dr. Avery as capacity consultant. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was clean. Beautifully clean. A whole cage built out of respectable titles. What about the Reading House property? Sold within 90 days. Quietly. Buyer already waiting. For how much? 8.7 million. The number had weight. Not just because it was large. Because Margaret's dream had been priced like meat. I stood and walked to the window. The harbor was still gray. A gull landed on the railing, looked at me with complete disrespect, then flew off. Margaret would have liked that bird. I turned back to Beatrice. I need proof. Yes. I need the piano. Yes. I need Emma safe. Beatrice nodded. That first. Can you get her out? Not without making Grace panic. But I can keep near her. I can make sure she is never alone with Nolan today. Nolan. Her face hardened. Nolan is worse than Grace. That sentence stayed with me all morning. Worse than Grace. I had not yet understood how true it was. At breakfast, they tested me. That is how I think of it now. Not breakfast. A test. Grace placed tea in front of me. Not coffee. Something gentler today. I smiled. Your mother said tea tasted like hot regret. Grace's eyes cooled. She drank tea every night. When she had a cold. Nolan hid a smile behind his cup. Dr. Avery watched like a man taking notes without paper. Emma sat across from me, silent, pushing a blueberry around her plate. I did not touch the tea. Instead I knocked my spoon to the floor, bent slowly, and as I came up I tipped the cup into my napkin. Messy. Old man mistake. Grace jumped up. Oh, Dad. Sorry. It's fine. It was not fine. Her eyes went to the empty cup, then to Nolan. Another glance. Another entry in the invisible ledger between them. Dr. Avery leaned forward. Henry, have you noticed any recent tremors? No. You spilled your tea. I disliked it efficiently. Emma almost smiled. Grace did not. Nolan said, Henry's always been stubborn. Dr. Avery nodded. Sometimes stubbornness masks anxiety about decline. There it was. The first public brick. Decline. I let my face go blank. Not angry. Blank. Men who have worked in county government know how to look blank while considering violence against a spreadsheet. Grace touched my wrist. We just want to make things easier. I know. I made my voice softer than I felt. That pleased her. I saw it. Maybe after breakfast we can review those papers, she said. What papers? She looked at Nolan. Good. I had given them what they wanted. A small memory slip. Nolan said gently, the transition documents we discussed, Henry. Did we discuss them? Dr. Avery tilted his head. Noted. I could almost hear him putting the word into a report. Emma stared at her plate. Grace squeezed my wrist. It is okay, Dad. We will go slowly. Go slowly. Predators love slow when the victim is standing still. After breakfast, Nolan asked me to join him in the library. The inn's library was one of those rooms built for photographs more than reading. Leather chairs no one had softened with use. Shelves arranged by color instead of subject. A globe that spun too smoothly to have ever helped anyone find anything. Margaret would have muttered crimes against books. Nolan closed the door. Grace stayed in the hall with Dr. Avery. That told me Nolan wanted the first pressure point privately. He poured himself coffee from a sideboard and did not offer me any. Henry, I want to speak man to man. Nothing good has ever followed that phrase. I am listening. You know Grace is carrying a lot. Yes. She has Emma. The inn. Her mother's memory. Your paperwork. The property. And frankly, some of your recent confusion has been hard on her. My confusion. He nodded slowly, like a banker accepting a sad deposit. Small things. Dates. Conversations. Repeated questions. The doctor thinks it could be stress, but we need to be realistic. Do we? Henry. There was the tone. The younger man telling the older man how dignity should sound. No one is trying to take anything from you. That sentence always means something is already being taken. We are trying to protect what Margaret wanted. You knew what Margaret wanted. His eyes sharpened. I knew what Grace told me. Better. A crack. And what did Grace tell you? That Margaret wanted the reading house protected under family leadership. Family leadership. Yes. With you as financial administrator. That is practical, not personal. Of course. Theft always loves practicality. He set his cup down. The papers are simple. Grace manages the trust. I handle administrative strategy. Avery provides medical support if anyone questions the transition. You remain honored, included, respected. Honored. Yes. Do I remain owner? A small pause. There it was. Ownership is not the right lens. I nearly smiled. Nolan had just handed me the whole truth in 5 words. Ownership is not the right lens. It never is for the person trying to take it. I let my hand tremble. Just enough. I need to think. Of course. He leaned in. But thinking cannot become avoidance. There are deadlines. The buyer is serious. The tax exposure changes if we wait. Grace has been shielding you from the complicated parts, but at some point shielding becomes impossible. The buyer. He froze. Only for a second. What buyer? I asked. He recovered. Potential buyer. Hypothetical. Name. Henry, this is exactly the kind of detail that adds stress. I nodded like an old fool being managed. Inside, the auditor woke up fully. A buyer exists. The price exists. The deadline exists. The medical support exists. The public announcement is tomorrow. All I needed was the paper Margaret had hidden. And enough time to turn their confidence into evidence. That afternoon, I pretended to nap. Grace checked once at 2:15. She opened the door without knocking. I kept my breathing slow. She stood at the foot of the bed for nearly a minute. I could feel her watching me. Then she stepped close enough that I smelled her perfume. Rose and smoke. Margaret had hated that perfume. Grace whispered, "Why are you making this hard?" I did not move. She sighed. "You were supposed to be grateful." Then she left. I opened my eyes. There are moments when the person you love most reveals they are already gone from you. Not dead. Not unreachable. Just gone from the moral place where you still thought they lived. That whisper did it. You were supposed to be grateful. Not safe. Not healed. Not protected. Grateful. At 4, Beatrice brought clean towels and a folded piece of paper hidden inside them. A schedule. Grace and Nolan would attend a donor planning dinner at a restaurant in town from 7:30 to 9. Dr. Avery would be there. Emma would remain at the inn with a sitter Beatrice trusted. The chapel would be empty after 8. At 8:10, I met Beatrice by the back stairs. Not the main staircase. The back one. The same kind of narrow servant stairs Margaret had died on in our old house. I stood at the top for a second too long. Beatrice noticed. "Do not let wood scare you," she said. "It is not the wood." "I know." We went down. The air outside smelled of cold salt and rain. The path to the chapel ran behind the inn through a small garden, then across a stone courtyard. No moon. Only the yellow windows of the inn behind us and the white chapel ahead. Beatrice unlocked a side door. Inside, the chapel smelled of old hymnals, wax, and damp stone. Rows of white pews faced a small altar decorated with dried sea grass for weddings. Margaret would have called it tasteful enough to be suspicious. We crossed to a narrow door behind the altar and descended into the basement. The old Sunday school room was low-ceilinged and cold. Stacked chairs. Folded tables. Boxes of linens. A cracked chalkboard with the words "Be kind" still ghosted across it. And against the far wall, covered in a grey cloth, stood Margaret's piano. I stopped. It felt wrong seeing it there. Like finding a family member stored under a church. Beatrice lifted the cloth. The dark wood gleamed faintly in the flashlight beam. The bench sat in front of it. I knelt and opened the lid. Nothing. I ran my hand along the inside. Dust. Old sheet music. A pencil. Beatrice said, "Margaret was not obvious." No. I tipped the bench carefully. The bottom panel looked normal. Then I saw the left screw. Wrong head. 3 screws were brass. 1 was steel. A replacement. I took out my pocket knife. Beatrice held the flashlight steady. The screw came loose. Then the panel shifted. Inside was a flat oilcloth packet wrapped in twine. My hands went numb. Beatrice whispered, "She did it." I opened the packet. Inside were documents. Margaret's real will. A trust amendment. Copies of bank transfers. Printed emails. A handwritten letter. A small flash drive taped to the back of a photograph. The photograph showed Margaret and Emma in our kitchen, both laughing over a pie crust disaster. I turned it over. Margaret had written, "Henry, I tried to stop this quietly. I was wrong. If you are reading this, trust Beatrice, protect Emma, and do not let Grace turn grief into paperwork." I sat on the cold floor because my legs stopped cooperating. Beatrice said nothing. She had the mercy not to fill the room. I unfolded the handwritten letter. "Henry. If this reaches you, it means I failed to make you listen while I was alive, or I was too afraid to say it plainly. Grace and Nolan are not protecting the reading house. They are trying to take it. Harbolite Senior Care is not what Grace claims. It is a machine for controlling older people through medical letters, family pressure, and legal documents. I found 7 names. Maybe more. Dr. Avery is involved. He writes capacity concerns for families who want control. Nolan routes properties to buyers. Grace handles the emotional side. She makes it look like care. I think they have been giving me something at night. I get dizzy after cider or tea. My hands shake. Twice I woke and could not remember going upstairs. If I fall, do not believe it was simple. Please forgive me for hiding this in pieces. I was trying to protect Emma. She heard Grace and Nolan arguing. She knows enough to be in danger if they panic. I love you. I am not afraid of dying. I am afraid of leaving you inside their story. Margaret. I read the letter once. Then again. The second time, I stopped at one sentence. I am afraid of leaving you inside their story. That was exactly where I had been for 11 months. Inside their story. Grieving in the room they built for me. I pressed the letter to my chest and tried not to make a sound. Beatrice knelt beside me. I am sorry, Henry. I should have known. Yes. Her honesty startled me. Most people would have said no. She did not. Then she added, but knowing late is not the same as never knowing. That saved me from something. Maybe not guilt. But paralysis. We copied everything with Beatrice's phone. Not just the letter. All of it. The trust amendment named the Reading House property as irrevocably dedicated to the Margaret Whittaker Community Trust. Grace was specifically removed as trustee. Nolan was barred from any administrative role. Dr. Avery was named in Margaret's notes as a possible participant in financial exploitation. The flash drive contained audio. We did not play it there. Beatrice said the chapel basement was too exposed. She was right. We repacked the piano bench carefully, but this time we took the originals. A copy of blank paper went back inside the oilcloth to keep the same shape. Fraud teaches you something useful. If someone checks a hiding place, they rarely inspect weight with their conscience. We were halfway back across the courtyard when I saw a light in the inn window. Grace's room. She was back early. Beatrice grabbed my arm. Slow. Every instinct told me to hurry. But hurried old men look guilty. Slow old men look old. We crossed the garden path at a careful pace. At the side door, Beatrice took the documents from under my coat and slipped them into the linen basket. If they search you, you have nothing. Would Grace search me? Beatrice looked at me. The answer was in her face. Inside, Nolan stood in the back hallway. Alone. Waiting. Henry, he said. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. Couldn't sleep. Wanted air. In the chapel. I looked past him toward the staircase. Is that where I was? He studied me. I let confusion enter my face slowly. Not too much. Too much looks like theater. Just enough. Nolan glanced at Beatrice. She found you outside? Yes, sir, Beatrice said. Near the garden path. He seemed turned around. Nolan's eyes returned to me. Turned around. I gave a small embarrassed laugh. Old houses. Too many doors. There it was. A gift. Not for me. For him. He could use it tomorrow. Henry wandered outside confused. Good. Let him. Let them build the case they thought they needed. Beatrice lowered her head and walked away with the linen basket and Margaret's proof. Nolan stepped close. Not touching. Almost. You scared Grace. Did I? She is under enormous strain. So everyone keeps telling me. His smile faded. You need to make tomorrow easy. I thought tomorrow was breakfast. It is. And papers. Yes. What if I do not sign? The hallway seemed to tighten. Nolan's face did not change much. That was worse than anger. Anger reacts. Coldness calculates. Then people will start asking why a grieving widower is refusing the one thing that would protect his wife's legacy. That sounds like pressure. No, Henry. Pressure is what happens when families stop helping quietly. I looked at him. There it was. The thread under the suit. Good night, Nolan. I walked past him before he could answer. My back stayed straight all the way up the stairs. Inside my room, I locked the door and sat in the dark. I had Margaret's letter in my memory. Beatrice had the proof. Emma was still in the house. And by tomorrow morning, my daughter planned to put a pen in my hand. For the first time since Margaret died, grief was no longer the largest thing in me. Rage had finally found structure. Beatrice and I listened to Margaret's flash drive at 5:20 in the morning. Not in my room. Too risky. Not in the library. Too many doors. We used the laundry room behind the kitchen because machines make good cover and no one questions old staff folding sheets before sunrise. She brought a small laptop with a cracked corner and the attitude of someone who trusted neither clouds nor grandchildren with passwords. The first file was labeled Henry 1. Margaret's voice filled the room. Thin. Tired. Still Margaret. If this works, Henry, you will be angry at me for not telling you sooner. That is fair. Be angry after you are safe. I gripped the edge of the folding table. Beatrice paused the recording. Do you want a minute? No. That was a lie. She knew it. She pressed play anyway. Margaret continued. Grace has been asking about trust language again. Nolan wants access to the carriage house appraisal. Avery says I am anxious and fixating. I am not anxious. I am watching them lie badly and politely. I closed my eyes. There she was. My wife. Still seeing clearly. Still cutting through perfume and paperwork. The recording shifted. A click. Rustle. Then muffled voices. Grace. Mom will never agree to sell. Nolan. Then she does not agree. She declines. She loses capacity. Pick one. Grace's voice, lower now. You make it sound simple. Because it is simple. Avery writes the concern. You document the behavior. We keep Henry out of the details until afterward. Then Grace said something I will never forget. Dad will believe me if I cry before I explain. The laundry room went very still. The machines hummed. Somewhere upstairs a floorboard creaked. Beatrice did not look at me. That was kind. The next file was worse. Margaret had recorded herself after what sounded like one of the drugged evenings. Her voice slurred slightly. I drank the cider at 7. By 8:30 my legs felt heavy. Grace says I repeated myself. I do not remember repeating myself. Avery asked if I knew what month it was. I told him September, and he smiled like I had made a mistake. It is September. Henry, it is September. If anyone tells you otherwise, check the calendar on my desk. I am not losing time naturally. Someone is taking it. Someone is taking it. I had spent a career looking for stolen money. I had never understood stolen time could be documented the same way. The third file had Nolan and Avery. Avery said, too much creates liability. She has to be suggestible, not incapacitated. Nolan answered, I am paying for manageable. Manageable. That was my wife. Not a partner. Not a mother. Not a person. Manageable. I had to step away from the table. My hands wanted something breakable. Beatrice watched the hallway. Breathe quietly, she said. That was when I realized she was angry too. Not loudly. Beatrice's anger was old courthouse anger. Filed, labeled, and ready to be introduced as evidence. The fourth file was the one that changed everything. It had no label. Just a date. The night before Margaret died. At first there was only room noise. Then Grace crying. Not performance crying. Real crying. That hurt in its own awful way. Mom, why couldn't you just leave it alone? Margaret's voice was weak but clear. Because 7 families lost homes. You do not understand the exposure. I understand theft. Nolan entered the recording then. Margaret, you are tired. You are confused. You are turning administrative irregularities into a moral crusade. Margaret laughed once. A dry little sound. Do not use soft words with me. I taught 4th graders with better lies. Even in that room, with my heart coming apart, I nearly smiled. Then Avery spoke. Let us all calm down. Margaret, drink this. No. Grace, sobbing now. Please, Mom. You are scaring Emma. A chair scraped. Margaret said, Where is Emma? Nolan answered, Asleep. Margaret said, Then do not use her as a leash. Silence. Then a sound. Glass breaking. A struggle. Margaret gasping. Grace saying, Not so much. Avery, sharp now. She already swallowed enough. Nolan. Get her upstairs. No more conversation. The file ended there. Not with the fall. Not with the stairs. With enough. She already swallowed enough. I sat down on the laundry room floor because there was no chair close enough. Beatrice paused the laptop and stood over me, one hand on the machine, one hand pressed to her own mouth. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then she said, We take this to the police. No. She stared at me. No. Not yet. Henry. If we go now, Grace cries. Nolan says the recordings are edited. Avery says Margaret was paranoid. They say I am grieving and suggestible. They move Emma. They bury the trust documents in emergency motions. They make this a fight over a dead woman's unstable recordings. Beatrice did not answer. She hated that I was right. So did I. I stood slowly. We need them alive inside the lie. They are alive enough. No. Comfortable enough. That was what fraud had taught me. People confess fastest when they think they are explaining something to someone beneath them. Nolan thought I was old. Grace thought I was grieving. Avery thought language could outrun reality. Good. Let them. At 7, Grace sent a text asking if I was awake. Not called. Texted. That way she could later show concern without risking my unscripted voice. I replied with 3 words. A little tired. She answered instantly. Take your time. Big morning. We love you. We love you. There was that pronoun again. At breakfast, I gave them what they wanted. Not too much. That is important. A convincing decline is not a collapse. It is a series of small profitable uncertainties. I asked what day it was, then corrected myself before anyone answered. I misplaced my glasses on my own head. I called the chapel the little church place. I asked if Margaret's portrait had always been in the dining room. Grace's face softened with each mistake. Nolan looked almost peaceful. Dr. Avery watched me like a man seeing a clean form fill itself out. Emma saw too. At first she looked scared. Then I tapped twice on my water glass. Our code from when she was younger. 2 taps meant I am pretending. Margaret invented it during long church services when Emma needed to know adults were bored too. Emma's eyes widened. Then she looked down quickly. Good girl. Grace placed a folder beside my plate. Not now, she said brightly. After the donor breakfast. What is in it? Just the transition package. Did I ask for that? Her hand stilled. Dr. Avery leaned in. Henry, do you remember discussing the need to reduce stress around property management? I remember many people discussing me near me. Nolan laughed gently. That sounds like Henry. Grace did not laugh. I saw suspicion cross her face. Too sharp. I softened immediately. I am sorry. I am nervous. There. Suspicion faded. Power returned to her. It is okay, Dad. She reached for my hand. This is why we are helping. I let her hold it. I thought of Margaret's voice saying, she already swallowed enough. I let my daughter hold my hand and imagined handcuffs closing around hers. The donor breakfast began at 10 in the chapel hall. About 40 people came. Town council members. Retired teachers. 2 local donors. A bank president who had once told me municipal audits were mostly formalities right before I found a vendor kickback scheme in his cousin's department. He avoided me now. Smart man. Grace stood near Margaret's portrait greeting everyone like a daughter carrying noble grief. Nolan worked the room with comfortable greed. Dr. Avery spoke softly to a woman from the senior center. Emma sat in the second row with Beatrice behind her. Good. I stood near the wall holding black coffee Beatrice had brought me from the kitchen. The real kind. At 10:20, Grace began. She spoke beautifully. I will give her that. Some people weaponize ugliness. Grace weaponized beauty. She spoke about Margaret's love of books. About community. About aging with dignity. About daughters carrying mothers forward. People dabbed their eyes. Even I might have, in another life. Then Nolan stepped up. He thanked everyone for supporting what he called a thoughtful transition of stewardship. He said I had shown remarkable humility in recognizing that grief and age had made some responsibilities heavier. He said Grace would be assuming trustee duties. He said Dr. Avery had kindly agreed to serve as wellness advisor during the transition. He said the Reading House property would be evaluated for maximum community impact. That meant sold. I knew it. Beatrice knew it. Emma knew enough. The room did not. Then Grace called me forward. My legs felt steady. That annoyed me. Sometimes you want your body to match the drama. Mine simply walked. I stood beside my daughter in front of the room. She put one arm around me. There were cameras. Phone cameras. A photographer Nolan had hired. Perfect. Grace held the microphone. Dad, I know this is emotional. But I also know Mom would be proud of your courage today. I looked at Margaret's portrait. No, I thought. She would be furious I let this get this far. But she would understand the trap. Grace turned to the room. My father has agreed to take the first step this morning by signing a letter of intent. Not the full documents yet, just a statement of trust in the process. That was new. A test before the real signature. Smart. Nolan handed her a single sheet. Not the folder. A short document. Less dangerous on the surface. I took it. The title read Statement of Intent Regarding Transition of Stewardship. I let my eyes move slowly. The body said I acknowledged Grace and Nolan's support, accepted Dr. Avery's recommendations, and intended to complete formal transfer documents within 48 hours. Not legally final. But useful. A public breadcrumb. I held the paper for just long enough that the room began to feel the silence. Then I said into the microphone, "Did Margaret write this?" Grace's smile trembled. "No, Dad. This is from us." "Then why does it say her wishes?" Nolan stepped closer. "It reflects her wishes." "Does it?" Dr. Avery appeared at my side. "Henry, perhaps we should sit." The room shifted. Concern rising. Good. Let them see the script forming. I looked at Grace, then at the audience, then back at the paper. I am tired. Grace exhaled softly. She thought she had won the moment. "It is okay, Dad." I handed the paper back and signed. "I will sign later." The disappointment in Nolan's eyes was fast, but not invisible. Grace recovered. "Of course." She turned to the room. "This is exactly why we are moving gently." A few people nodded. That was useful too. They were seeing the false frame. Later, when it broke, they would remember how willingly they had almost stepped into it. Humiliation can be a strong witness. After the breakfast, Nolan cornered me behind the chapel. No cameras. No guests. No Grace. Just the two of us by a rack of folding chairs and a box labeled wedding lanterns. His smile was gone. "What was that?" I said I would sign later. "You embarrassed Grace. She will recover." His jaw moved. "You need to be careful, Henry. Of folding chairs. Of making this adversarial. Is it?" He stepped closer. "You are not as sharp as you think you are." That was the first honest thing he had said to me. I smiled. That irritated him. "Tonight," he said. "You sign tonight. Privately. No performance. No wandering. No cute old man routine. Or what? His eyes went flat. Or Dr. Avery recommends an emergency cognitive hold. Grace has enough documentation. You wandered outside last night. You displayed confusion this morning. You refused a simple public statement in a paranoid manner. You have been busy. We have been prepared. There. Prepared. The word tasted like a confession. I let my face go uncertain. Would they take me somewhere? His expression softened into something ugly. Only if you make that necessary. For my safety. Exactly. He liked that I understood the line. That was his mistake. I understood the line because I had written fraud reports about men like him for decades. When I returned to the inn, Beatrice was waiting in the service hall. Trouble? She asked. Emergency cognitive hold tonight if I do not sign. She went still. We move now. Not yet. Henry. We need someone with authority before tonight. I made a call. That got my attention. To whom? Elena Torres. The name took a second. Then I remembered. Assistant Attorney General. Elder Exploitation Unit. I had worked with her once on a county vendor case when she was young enough to look underestimated and smart enough to use it. She is in Portland, Beatrice said. She can be here by 4. How much does she know? Enough to come. Did you send the recordings? Encrypted. Along with photos of the documents. I breathed for what felt like the first time all day. Good. Do not look relieved. Grace is watching. I looked toward the lobby. Grace stood near the fireplace pretending to adjust flowers. Her eyes were on me through the mirror. So I gave her what she needed. I put one hand to my forehead. Beatrice took my elbow. Sir. I need to sit. Grace hurried over. Dad. I am fine. You are pale. Nolan appeared from nowhere. Dr. Avery too. They were getting faster. That meant the trap was closing. Or they felt it might be. Either way, time had become thin. They brought me tea. I pretended to sip. Beatrice swapped the cup when no one watched. Old court stenographers should run intelligence agencies. At 4:10, Elena Torres arrived. Not through the front. Through the kitchen delivery entrance in a navy coat and rain-damp hair, carrying a leather folder and no patience. She looked older than I remembered, of course. We all did. But her eyes were the same. Direct. Unimpressed. She listened in the laundry room while Beatrice played the key recordings. I watched her face. She did not gasp. She did not perform shock. Good prosecutors do not waste outrage early. They save it for filing language. When Margaret's voice said, I am afraid of leaving you inside their story, Elena closed her eyes briefly. That was the only crack. Then she opened them and said, we need Emma out before anything goes public. Can you do that? I asked. Not cleanly without a basis. Beatrice pointed to the recording. That is a basis. For an investigation. For immediate child removal, I need present danger or cooperation from a guardian. Grace is the danger. Yes. And courts still require more than what we know in our bones. I hated that. But I had lived long enough around legal systems to know truth and usable truth are different creatures. Elena continued. There is another way. If Henry signs nothing and they attempt the cognitive hold, we can intervene. But it gives them the opening move. No, I said. Both women looked at me. No. Elena asked. I will sign. Beatrice cursed quietly. Elena studied me. What exactly do you mean? I mean they expect me to sign tonight privately. So we give them a private signing. But not their document. Elena's eyes sharpened. Explain. I told her. Not perfectly. The plan formed as I spoke. A decoy document. A real recording. A controlled room. A visible pen. A hidden witness. And the one thing people like Nolan cannot resist. Explaining how clever they are when they think the victim is already defeated. Elena listened. Then said, risky. Yes. Potentially useful. Yes. Emotionally satisfying in a way that makes me suspicious. Also yes. That earned the smallest smile. Then she became serious again. We do it with safeguards. Audio. Video. A deputy nearby. Child services alerted but quiet. A bank freeze request prepared. Emergency injunction ready for the trust property. If they confess enough, we move tonight. If they do not, we still move on the recordings and documents tomorrow. What about Emma? At the first credible threat involving her, we remove her. That had to be enough. Enough is a cruel word. But sometimes it is what stands between doing nothing and doing something. By 6, the plan was set. Beatrice would keep Emma in the kitchen helping bake the memorial cookies Margaret used to make badly and enthusiastically. Elena would stay in the laundry room monitoring audio through a device Beatrice planted under the sideboard in the small parlor. A deputy named Markham would wait outside in an unmarked car near the service entrance. I would meet Grace, Nolan, and Dr. Avery at 8 in the small parlor. They believed they would present the full transition documents. Instead, Beatrice had managed to photograph enough of the pages for Elena to prepare a controlled substitution. The first pages looked similar. The signature page looked similar. But the document I would actually sign was not a transfer. It was an acknowledgement that I had received and rejected their proposed authority package, with a small witness certification line hidden behind what looked like a trustee initials block. Would they read it carefully? No. That was the bet. Fraudsters rarely read what they believe they wrote. They read the victim. At 7:45, Grace came to my room. She wore soft gray now. No black. Transition color. She carried a cup. Cider, she said. I looked at it. Again. Her face softened. Mom loved it. No, she did not. But I took it. This time I raised it to my lips and let a small amount touch my mouth. Bitter. Stronger than before. My stomach tightened. I set it down on the bedside table. I want to be clear tonight. She smiled. Of course. Then she reached for the cup. Bring it with you. It might help you relax. That was clumsy. Grace was losing elegance. Pressure does that. I carried the cup downstairs. In the hallway, Beatrice passed me with a tray. Her sleeve brushed my hand. The cup vanished. A clean one appeared. Same color. Same smell at the top. Different truth inside. At 8, I entered the parlor. Grace sat on the sofa. Nolan stood by the fireplace. Dr. Avery sat in an armchair with his leather medical bag beside him. That bag bothered me. Not because I knew what was inside. Because I did not. The folder waited on the table. A pen rested on top. Silver. Heavy. Performative. Nolan smiled. There he is. Not there you are. There he is. Like I was an object arriving at its own transfer. I sat slowly. Grace leaned forward. Dad, we are going to make this simple. Good. I let my voice sound tired. I am tired of being difficult. Her eyes filled. Useful tears again. Oh, Dad. Nolan picked up the folder. This document allows Grace to manage the Margaret Whittaker Community Trust, including related properties and future disposition decisions. Disposition. That was the sale. Future disposition, I repeated. Correct. What does that mean? Nolan glanced at Avery. Avery smiled kindly. It means the burden moves away from you. The burden. Grace took my hand. You deserve peace. I looked at her hand over mine. Did your mother deserve peace? Her fingers stiffened. What? Margaret. For 1 second the room lost its script. Avery recovered first. Henry, this evening is about reducing stress, not revisiting trauma. Did she deserve peace? Grace withdrew her hand. Of course she did. Then why was she scared before she died? The silence that followed was worth almost everything. Nolan's eyes sharpened. Avery's smile faded. Grace looked like I had slapped her, but not because she was hurt. Because I had said a forbidden sentence. "Dad," she whispered. "Where is this coming from?" I touched the cup. "I am not sure." "Good. Let them decide whether the drops had made me loose or dangerous. Uncertainty pushes liars into decisions." Nolan leaned forward. "Henry, grief creates patterns where there are none. You know this. Margaret had an accident." "Did she?" "Yes." He said it too fast. Grace said, "Please do not do this tonight." Avery reached for his bag. I watched him. So did the hidden camera. "Do what?" "Punish me," Grace said. There it was. She had made herself the victim before the accusation was even clear. "I am not punishing you. You are. You have been cold all day. Suspicious. Forgetful 1 minute, cruel the next. Do you know what that is like for me?" Nolan sat beside her. "Grace, breathe. No. Let her talk. Please," I thought. Let her talk. She did. "I gave up everything to help you. I carried Mom's papers. I managed your bills. I kept the reading house from becoming a mess. I protected Emma from all this ugliness." "From what ugliness?" She stared at me. "From adult things." Nolan's voice came in colder. "Sign the document, Henry." Avery said, "I agree. This line of conversation is unhealthy." I looked at him. "What is in your bag?" He paused. "Medical supplies. For me. If needed." "Needed how?" Nolan stood. "That is enough." I lifted the pen. The room relaxed just slightly. There it was. All three of them breathing toward the signature. I opened the folder. The top page looked like theirs. Elena had done good work. Nolan turned the pages for me. Not letting me read. Guiding. Initial here. Here. And final signature on the last page. I let the pen hover. "I want Grace to tell me one thing first." Nolan's jaw tightened. "What?" I looked at my daughter. "Why did Margaret change the trust?" Grace went pale. "Only a little. But enough." "I do not know what you mean." "She removed you." Nolan moved fast. Not toward me. Toward the folder. I pulled it back clumsily, like a startled old man. Avery said, "Paranoia can intensify under stress." "Is it paranoia if the document exists?" Nolan's face changed. He knew then. "Not everything. But enough." "Where did you get that?" Grace turned to him. "Nolan." I kept my voice confused. "Get what?" Nolan realized his mistake. Too late. Elena heard it. The camera caught it. Grace heard it too. Her fear turned into anger. "Dad, whatever you found, you do not understand it. Then explain it." I was trying to save this family. From that moment on, the room belonged to the truth. Not all of it yet. But enough to change the air. Nolan whispered, "Grace, stop." She did not. I was the one here. I was the one dealing with Mom's obsession. Her accusations. Her files. Her panic. You were in your little audit office acting like numbers were life. I was the one watching everything fall apart. I stared at her. My little audit office. 38 years reduced to a child's contempt. "What did Margaret accuse you of?" "She accused me of not caring about old people." "Did you?" "Do not twist this." Nolan stepped between us. "Enough. Henry, sign or we call Markham House tonight." There it was. The facility. Markham House. Avery said smoothly, "A short-term assessment residence. For confused old men. For vulnerable adults requiring protective evaluation." Vulnerable adults. Another phrase built like a padded cell. I turned to Nolan. "Would Emma visit me there?" Grace answered, too quickly. "When appropriate." That phrase snapped something in me. Not visibly. Inside. When appropriate. The same kind of phrase she had used to control Margaret. The same kind she planned to use on Emma. The same kind she would have used on me once the door closed. I signed. Not their transfer. Elena's acknowledgement. Henry Arthur Whitaker. Clear. Steady. No tremor. Nolan saw the signature and smiled. He did not read. Grace covered her face and cried. Avery exhaled. The three of them believed the trap had closed around me. They did not know it had closed around them. Nolan took the folder. I will secure this. Of course, I said. My voice was small. Old. Finished. He turned toward the door. Then Elena Torres stepped in from the service hall. Actually, she said, I will take that. The folder slipped in Nolan's hand. Grace stopped crying instantly. Dr. Avery stood. Who are you? Elena held up her badge. Assistant Attorney General Torres. Elder Exploitation Unit. No one moved. The room had become a photograph. Elena crossed to Nolan and took the folder from him before he remembered how hands worked. She opened it to the signature page. Read it. Then looked at me. Clean signature, Mr. Whitaker. Thank you. Nolan found his voice. This is a private family matter. Elena looked at him the way courthouse people look at men who begin with the wrong sentence. No, Mr. Pike. It stopped being private when it became a pattern. Grace stood. Dad, what did you do? I looked at my daughter. For the first time all day, I let her see me clearly. I listened to your mother. Her face changed. Not grief. Fear. Real fear. Good. A deputy entered through the hall. Then another. A woman from Child Protective Services followed, speaking quietly into her phone. Grace looked toward the door. Where is Emma? Safe, Beatrice said from behind her. I had never loved that old woman more. Grace spun around. You. Beatrice lifted her chin. Yes. The next minutes were ugly. Not dramatic in the way movies are ugly. Real ugly. Legal ugly. Everyone talking at once. Nolan demanding counsel. Grace demanding her daughter. Avery insisting on medical privilege. Elena asking precise questions in a voice that made panic sound childish. Deputies separating people. Phones collected. Documents bagged. The silver pen placed in evidence because Beatrice had also swapped that. There was a tiny recorder inside it. I did not know that part until later. Beatrice had added her own flourish. Never underestimate a woman who typed depositions for 30 years. Emma was taken to the kitchen, then out the service entrance with the child services worker and a deputy. Before she left, she saw me through the hall. I gave her 2 taps on my water glass. I am pretending. She gave me 1 back against the doorframe. I know. By 10:30 that night, Lantern House was no longer an inn. It was a crime scene with tasteful curtains. Search warrants came fast after that. Not full federal theater. Not yet. But enough. Elena's team searched Grace and Nolan's office. They found the brown bottle in a locked drawer behind guest tax records. The label said Wildflower Sleep Extract. It was not wildflower. It was a compounded sedative Dr. Avery had no legal reason to provide outside a prescription protocol. They found draft letters about my cognitive state. 3 versions. 1 gentle. 1 urgent. 1 severe enough to justify immediate placement. All undated. Ready to be used when needed. They found a file named HW Transition. Inside were staged incident notes. Henry wandered after midnight. Henry repeated questions at breakfast. Henry spilled tea and became defensive. Henry displayed paranoia around daughter support. Henry refused medical assessment despite visible confusion. Some of those things had happened. Because I let them happen. That made the file both more frightening and more useful. Predators do not need to invent every fact. They only need to frame the fact before you do. The real discovery came just after midnight. Behind a false panel in Nolan's office closet, Elena's team found 7 folders. Not mine. Other people. Dorothy Baines. Samuel Porter. Irene Walsh. The Kessler twins. Marion Cole. Arthur Bellamy. Judith Crane. Each folder had property assessments. Medical notes. Family contact summaries. Draft capacity letters. Transfer timelines. Vendor routes. Expected liquidation values. 7 families. 7 lives turned into folders. Margaret had been right. Maybe she had only found the surface. Nolan's laptop held more. Spreadsheets. People like Nolan trust spreadsheets because they think rows have no conscience. One tab was labeled soft assets. Under it were categories. Widower with land. Adult-child cooperative. Physician-friendly. High emotional leverage. Low outside oversight. I found my own name 2/3 down the page. Henry Whitaker. Estimated access value, 8.7 M property, 1.3 M liquid, 600K securities. Leverage, daughter, granddaughter, grief, trust complexity. Obstacle, Margaret legacy documents, possible Beatrice Lane connection. Status, signing pending. There is a special coldness in seeing your life summarized by the people trying to take it. Not even hated. Assessed. Grace's notes were different. More emotional. More dangerous. She had written scripts. If Dad resists, cry before explaining. If Dad asks about Mom, redirect to grief. If Emma mentions stairs, say dream. If Beatrice approaches, terminate staff contract. If Dad refuses signature, activate Markham House. If Emma mentions stairs, say dream. That line alone could have carried a trial. At 2 in the morning, Elena found me in the closed dining room sitting alone before Margaret's portrait. She placed a folder on the table. Henry. I looked up. I had aged 10 years in 6 hours. At least it felt that way. What? We found enough to arrest Nolan and Dr. Avery tonight on financial exploitation, conspiracy, unlawful administration of medication, and attempted unlawful restraint. And Grace? Elena's face softened slightly. Yes. The word did not bring relief. I had imagined it would. That is another lie revenge tells you from far away. You think the moment the cuffs close, the pain will organize itself. It does not. It just loses a hiding place. They are arresting my daughter. Yes. I know she did this. Yes. I want her stopped. Yes. I still remember her at 7 years old with 2 missing teeth asking if worms had families. Elena sat across from me. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, quietly, both things can be true. That was the kindest legal sentence I ever heard. Both things can be true. Grace could be my little girl. Grace could also be the woman who helped drug her mother, planned to cage her father, and threatened her own child's truth. One truth did not cancel the other. It only made the wound impossible to simplify. At 2:17, they brought Grace through the dining room. Hands cuffed in front. Hair loose. Face pale. No tears now. She saw me and stopped. Dad. The deputy waited. Elena looked at me. My choice. I stood. Grace's lips trembled. You do not understand what Mom was going to do. That was her first sentence. Not I am sorry. Not what have I done. Not where is Emma. You do not understand. I said, then explain it. She looked at Elena. I want a lawyer. There it was. Truth ended where consequences began. The deputy led her out. Nolan came next. He did not look at me. Men like him believe eye contact gives away value. Dr. Avery came last, still trying to tell a deputy that his bag contained protected medical materials. Beatrice stood in the hallway and watched all 3 pass. Her face did not move. But when Avery went by, she said quietly, doctors used to be harder to buy. Avery looked at her. She smiled politely. It was a beautiful thing. By dawn, the harbor looked exactly the same. That offended me. The water should have changed color. The sky should have cracked. The gulls should have known better than to scream over a world that had just confessed itself. But morning came anyway. It always does. Emma spent that night with Beatrice in a cottage behind the chapel under temporary protective supervision. I did not sleep. At 7, I walked over with Elena. Emma was at the kitchen table eating toast. A blanket around her shoulders. Hair messy. Eyes too old. When she saw me, she got up so fast the chair nearly fell. I knelt and she ran into my arms. "Did I do bad?" she whispered. "No. Mom is gone. For now." "Because of me?" "No." I pulled back so she could see my face. "Because of what she did." Children need that sentence. Adults forget that. They hear consequences and assume the person who spoke truth caused them. No. Truth does not break a family. The thing being hidden does. Emma nodded, but I knew the work of believing it would take years. Beatrice placed a mug in front of me. "Coffee. Real." "You look terrible," she said. "Good morning to you too." Emma actually smiled. Small. But real. That smile was the first piece of the world returning. For the next 48 hours, the case widened. Elena's team froze the Reading House property. The bank froze accounts tied to Harbolite Senior Care. Search warrants went out for Nolan's development company, Dr. Avery's practice, Markham House, and 2 shell vendors that had billed for care coordination services nobody could define without lying. The 7 other families were contacted. Some cried. Some shouted. Some refused to believe it at first. That last part mattered. People think victims always welcome proof. They do not. Proof can feel like a second violation. It says not only were you harmed, but your understanding of your own life was used against you. I understood that now. One of the families, the Porters, had lost a farmhouse after their father was declared unable to manage his affairs. Their daughter had signed everything, believing Dr. Avery's reports. Another woman, Judith Crane, had been moved to Markham House after arguing about a power of attorney. Her nephew had sold her condo 3 months later. Nolan's company had brokered the sale. Grace had sent family support notes in at least 4 cases under Harbolite letterhead. Soft emails. "We understand this is hard. Your loved one's dignity matters. Short-term decisions protect long-term peace. Words can be gloves. They can keep fingerprints off cruelty." Margaret had found those gloves and started pulling. That was why she died. The medical examiner reopened her case. That process took longer. Justice is slowest where grief is most impatient. They exhumed records. Reviewed toxicology possibilities. Examined pharmacy data. Compared Dr. Avery's logs with Grace's notes. The staircase itself could not speak. The body had already been buried. But the recording spoke. The bottle spoke. The staged report spoke. Emma spoke, carefully, with a child psychologist present. Beatrice spoke. I spoke. Margaret spoke through the files she had left behind. 3 weeks after the arrests, Elena came to my house in Vermont. Not the inn. My house. The one where Margaret had died. I had not wanted to go back, but Emma needed familiar rooms and Beatrice said fear should not own architecture. So we returned. The back staircase looked smaller than I remembered. Most haunted places do. Elena sat at my kitchen table with a folder. Emma was upstairs with Beatrice making a list of books she wanted from her old room at Grace's house. I had learned to distrust folders. "What is it?" I asked. Elena opened it. "We have enough to add charges related to Margaret." The air left me. Say it plainly. Conspiracy resulting in death. Unlawful administration of a controlled sedative. Evidence tampering. Financial exploitation tied to her trust. I looked at the table. There was a scratch near the edge from the year Grace tried to carve her name with a butter knife. Margaret had pretended to be furious, then kept the table forever because she said children who damage furniture are at least confident enough to leave evidence. "Will it hold?" I asked. "It will be a fight." "Will it hold?" Elena met my eyes. "Yes." I nodded. No tears came. That worried me. Then I realized the tears had simply moved elsewhere. Some grief does not leave through eyes. It settles into decisions. What about Emma? Temporary custody remains with you. Grace's parental rights are under emergency review. Nolan has no unsupervised access. Boarding school threat is documented. Emma's statements are consistent. She is 9. I know. She should be worried about spelling tests. I know. I want Grace to answer for that too. She will. The legal process took months. That is the part stories usually skip because paperwork is not cinematic. But if you have lived through betrayal, you know paperwork is where the second battle happens. Motions. Hearings. Continuances. Competency disputes. Suppression attempts. Claims of edited audio. Claims of grief-induced paranoia. Claims that I had manipulated Emma. Claims that Beatrice had planted documents. Claims that Margaret was unstable. That last one nearly made me stand in court before my attorney touched my arm. They tried to kill my wife twice. Once on the stairs. Again in the record. That is what defense teams sometimes do when the dead cannot object. They make the victim unreasonable. Too emotional. Too confused. Too controlling. Too old. Too sharp. Too anything except right. But Margaret had prepared better than they expected. The flash drive had metadata. The audio was authenticated. The trust documents had been notarized by a retired clerk who remembered Margaret because Margaret corrected his grammar on the acknowledgement page. That was my wife. Even legal formalities were not safe from her. The brown bottle had chemical consistency with the symptoms she described. Dr. Avery's prescription records had gaps shaped exactly like guilt. Nolan's spreadsheet connected the Reading House property to a buyer before Margaret died. Grace's notes connected Emma's dreams to deliberate memory control. And my signed decoy document proved they had tried to push me through a transfer while believing I was impaired. The other families came forward too. One after another. Some through lawyers. Some through tears. Some through rage so hot it burned clean across conference tables. Harbolite Senior Care became the center of the case. Not a charity. A pipeline. Identify vulnerable elder. Find cooperative relative. Obtain medical concern letter. Create documentation of confusion. Pressure transfer. Liquidate asset. Route money through service vendors. Repeat. That was the machine. Grace was not a side character in it. That hurt me to learn. At first, some part of me wanted to believe Nolan had pulled her in. That she had started with love and slipped. Maybe some of that was true in the beginning. But the evidence showed she became efficient. She wrote scripts for families. She taught relatives how to sound compassionate while removing control. She coached them to say, "We are worried about your safety," when they meant, "We need your signature before you call someone." She created the emotional language that made the machine run smoothly. Nolan converted assets. Avery converted medicine into authority. Grace converted love into compliance. That was her role. I had to name it before I could survive it. The plea offers came first. Nolan refused. Of course he did. Men like him believe accountability is a negotiation they can outlast. Dr. Avery tried to cooperate without admitting anything useful. Elena called it confession by fog machine. Grace considered a plea. For 2 days, I thought she might take it. Then her attorney filed a motion blaming Nolan and claiming Grace had been emotionally coerced. That was the last private mercy I had left for her. Not because coercion is impossible. Because she used it too late and too conveniently, after years of using everyone else's fear as a tool. The trial began in March. 6 months after the memorial dinner. By then Emma was living with me full time. She had nightmares. She also had good days. Both things can be true. She started leaving notes around my house. Not secret ones anymore. Open ones. On the fridge. By the coffee pot. Inside books. Grandpa, buy cereal. Grandpa, Beatrice says your plants look legally dead. Grandpa, I am not scared today. That last one stayed on the fridge longer than the others. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Reporters came because money, death, family betrayal, and a fake elder charity make a headline people pretend not to enjoy reading. I hated the cameras. Grace did not look at me when she entered. Nolan looked at everyone. Avery looked at the floor. The prosecution opened with Margaret. Not me. Not the money. Margaret. Elena stood before the jury and said, "This case is about people who learned that care language can be used as a weapon. They did not break into homes. They were invited in. They did not point a gun. They offered paperwork. They did not call it theft. They called it transition." I watched the jurors. Some leaned forward. Good. Then came the evidence. The first week was the machine. Harbolite documents. Financial trails. Other families. Medical reports. Property transfers. Emails. Spreadsheets. It was slow, dense, and devastating. Jurors may forget speeches. They do not forget a spreadsheet where an old widow is listed as high compliance, low oversight. The second week was Margaret. Her recordings played in court. Hearing her voice in that room nearly broke me. At home, grief is private. In court, grief becomes evidence. You sit still while strangers hear the last fear of the person you loved most. You cannot reach for her. You cannot answer her. You can only let the room learn what she knew before you did. When the recording played Grace saying, "Dad will believe me if I cry before I explain," one juror looked directly at Grace. Grace looked down. Good. When Avery's voice said, "Too much creates liability. She has to be suggestible, not incapacitated," his attorney wrote something on a pad he never used again. Good. When Nolan's voice said, "I am paying for manageable," the courtroom shifted. Not loudly. But you could feel it. People understand evil differently when it becomes administrative. The third week was me. I testified for 2 days. The defense tried to make me look bitter. That was not hard. I was bitter. They tried to make me look old. That was also not hard. I was old. They tried to make me look confused. That was where they failed. Nolan's attorney asked, "Mr. Whitaker, is it fair to say you felt humiliated by the idea that your daughter might need to help you manage your affairs?" I said, "No. I felt humiliated by how long it took me to realize she was trying to steal them." He did not like that. Grace's attorney asked if I hated my daughter. That question stopped the room. I looked at Grace. For the first time in weeks, she looked back. I remembered her at 7. The butter knife scratch. The missing teeth. The worm families. The child who used to fall asleep holding Margaret's hand. Then I remembered Emma whispering, "Do not drink." Both things can be true. "No," I said. "I do not hate my daughter. I hate what she chose. I hate what she did to her mother. I hate what she tried to do to my granddaughter. I hate the machine she helped build. But hatred is too simple for a child you raised." The courtroom was silent. Her attorney had no good follow-up. Emma did not testify in open court. Elena fought hard for that. Her recorded forensic interview was enough. I thanked every decent thing in the world for that mercy. The jury watched Emma on video, sitting in a small room with a stuffed rabbit, explaining that Grandma told her words can get sick if you leave them inside too long. One juror cried openly. I did not blame him. The defense tried to say Emma had been coached. Then Elena played the hallway recording from the night Emma came to my room. A child's whispered fear does not sound coached. It sounds like a child trying to survive adults. After 6 weeks, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for 9 hours. Those 9 hours felt longer than the 11 months after Margaret died. Beatrice sat beside me. Emma stayed home with a trusted neighbor and a pie she was making badly in Margaret's honor. At 6:42 in the evening, the jury came back. We stood. Nolan first. Guilty. 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 Dr. Avery. Guilty. 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 Grace. The clerk's voice trembled once before steadying. Guilty on conspiracy. Guilty on financial exploitation. Guilty on unlawful administration. Guilty on attempted unlawful restraint. Guilty on charges connected to Margaret's death. Grace made a sound then. Small. Not grief. Shock. Nolan stared forward. Avery closed his eyes. I sat down because standing had become impossible. People think verdicts bring closure. They bring direction. Closure is slower. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Nolan received 42 years. Dr. Avery received 28 and lost his medical license before the sentence was even finished. Grace received 35 years. The judge spoke for nearly 20 minutes. He said the crimes were especially cruel because they used the appearance of care to create helplessness. He said Margaret Whittaker had tried to protect not only herself, but other victims. He said Emma's courage had exposed adults who should have protected her. Grace cried at sentencing. Maybe for herself. Maybe for Emma. Maybe for the life she had destroyed. I will never know. When given a chance to speak, she turned toward me. Dad, she said, I am sorry. 2 words. After all that. I waited for more. There was no more. Maybe she had nothing left. Maybe she had never learned how to say the sentence without needing it to purchase something. I stood. My victim's statement was folded in my pocket. 3 pages. Written carefully. I did not read it. Instead I said, Grace, your mother loved you. I loved you. Emma loved you. That was never the shortage. The shortage was truth. You turned love into leverage and grief into paperwork. I hope one day you understand the difference between being punished and being answered. Then I sat. That was all. I did not feel triumphant. I felt emptied. Revenge, the real kind, does not taste like victory. It tastes like the poison finally leaving your mouth. You are grateful. You are alive. But you still remember swallowing it. 3 months after sentencing, I visited Grace once. Not because she asked well. Her first 2 letters were not apologies. They were explanations. Long, careful pages about pressure, Nolan, business debt, her fear of becoming poor, her resentment that Margaret always saw through her, her belief that I had loved the idea of a good daughter more than the real daughter standing in front of me. Some of it may have been true. That is the cruel thing about explanations. A truthful piece can sit inside a rotten hole. Her 3rd letter was shorter. Dad, I do not know what part of me thought this could become normal. I know I cannot ask you to forgive me. I am asking if you will let me see your face once without cameras. I carried that letter in my coat pocket for 9 days. Beatrice told me not to go if I wanted peace. Elena told me to go only if I understood that closure is not something another person hands you. Emma said nothing at first. Then one evening, while we were sorting donated books at the reading house, she asked, Do you still love Mom? I put down the box of paperbacks. Yes. She nodded like she had expected that and feared it anyway. Does that mean she gets to come back? No. Does love always let people come back? No. She looked at a book in her hands, then at me. Then what does it do? I wish I had a beautiful answer. I did not. Sometimes it just keeps you from lying about what they were before they hurt you. Emma thought about that for a long time. Then she placed the book on the shelf and said, Okay. You can go. But do not bring me back a message unless I ask. That was fair. So I went. The prison visiting room was brighter than I expected. Bad chairs. Vending machines. A mural on one wall that tried very hard to be hopeful and failed by committee. Grace came in wearing state-issued clothes and no makeup. For the first time in years, nothing about her was arranged. She looked smaller. Not weaker. Just less protected by setting. She sat across from me and placed both hands flat on the table. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she said, You look older. I almost laughed. So do you. That nearly broke her. Not because it was cruel. Because it sounded like our old family, back when ordinary remarks did not have to pass through guards. She blinked hard. I keep trying to remember when I crossed the line. I said, lines do not always announce themselves. No. But you crossed many after the first. She nodded. I know. That was the first time she said it without explaining around it. I waited. She looked at her hands. I hated Mom for seeing me. Not for misunderstanding me. For seeing me. I said nothing. She knew I wanted the money before I admitted it to myself. She knew I liked the way people listened when I sounded caring. She knew Nolan made me feel important because he needed me useful. And every time she looked at me, I felt already judged. Your mother judged actions. She judged me. She loved you. Grace finally looked up. I know. That made it worse. There are confessions that heal. There are confessions that only show you the shape of the damage. This was the second kind. She asked about Emma. I told her Emma was safe, reading, drawing, sometimes angry, sometimes happy, and not ready for messages. Grace cried then. Quietly. For once I believed the tears. But belief did not change the door. I want to tell her I am sorry, Grace said. One day maybe. When? When sorry stops needing an audience. She closed her eyes. I stood after 20 minutes. That was all I could give. At the door, she said, Dad. I turned. Do you forgive me? There it was. The question people think is the final page. It is not. Forgiveness is not a doorbell you ring so someone else can sleep better. I looked at my daughter through the scratched glass and told her the truth. I am not carrying revenge anymore. But I am still carrying the consequences of what you did. Do not ask me to call those the same thing. She nodded slowly. Then she sat back down. I left without looking back. Outside, the air smelled like rain. For the first time, I did not feel pulled in two directions by loving her and leaving her there. Both things could be true. I could love the child she had been. I could protect the child she had harmed. And I could stop offering my own confusion as a place for her guilt to hide. The civil recovery took another year. Harbolite Senior Care was dissolved. Nolan's development company collapsed under asset forfeiture orders. The shell vendors were traced. 2 more attorneys were disciplined. Markham House closed after state review found multiple improper placements tied to family financial disputes. The Porter farmhouse was returned. Judith Crane's condo could not be returned because it had been sold twice, but restitution bought her a new apartment near her niece. Irene Walsh's family recovered enough to pay for home care instead of institutional placement. 7 families became 11. Then 14. Margaret had found the edge of a larger wound. Her death opened the whole thing. I wish she had lived to see it. That sentence is useless. True. But useless. The Reading House opened the following September. Not under Grace. Not under Nolan. Under the Margaret Whittaker Community Trust exactly as she had written it. We turned the old carriage house into something better than even she had imagined. Large windows. Wide doors. Ramps. A children's reading room with mismatched chairs because Margaret hated rooms that looked purchased all at once. A senior help desk every Tuesday. A legal clinic twice a month. A locked cabinet where people could store copies of wills, powers of attorney, and emergency documents. Beatrice ran the document room. God help anyone who tried to bring her incomplete forms. Emma chose the color of the children's room. Yellow. At first I hesitated. The cider had been golden. The bell and other victim stories had been yellow. But Emma said, Grandma said yellow is only bad if bad people get to keep it. So yellow it was. Bright. Warm. Defiant. On opening day, more people came than expected. Old neighbors. Families from the case. Former library patrons. Reporters. Children who mostly came for cookies and stayed because Emma had arranged a shelf of books about dragons. I stood at the front with a note card I did not need. Margaret's portrait hung on the wall behind me. Not the formal memorial one Grace had used. The real one. Margaret in a cardigan, holding a mug, looking slightly irritated because I had taken the picture while she was trying to explain why the town budget was morally unserious. That was the Margaret I wanted in the room. I spoke briefly. For once. I said, my wife believed silence is where vulnerable people lose the most. This house exists because she refused silence. It exists because a child told the truth. It exists because people who are old, grieving, sick, or dependent are still people with rights, memory, dignity, and the ability to say no. If anyone ever tells you paperwork is too complicated for you to understand, bring it here. We like complicated paperwork. People laughed. Margaret would have liked that. After the ribbon cutting, Emma took my hand and led me to the old piano. We had moved it from the chapel basement into the reading house. Restored. Tuned poorly, because some traditions deserve respect. Inside the bench, under the lid, we placed a plaque. Not hidden. Visible. It said, "Believe the child. Read the paper. Ask the second question. Margaret Whittaker." Emma traced the letters with one finger. "Do you think Grandma sees it?" "I think if she does, she is correcting our font choice." Emma smiled. A real smile. More common now. Not constant. Healing is not a light switch. But more common. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the reading house. The smell of fresh paint, old wood, coffee, and books filled the air. Outside, rain tapped the windows. I thought about the night Emma handed me the napkin. The golden cider. The drops. Grace's smile. Nolan's folder. Avery's calm hands. Beatrice's warning. Margaret's voice on the recording. A whole chain of small truths that survived because someone carried them to the next person. That is what lies fear most. Not one heroic speech. Not one dramatic confrontation. A chain. A child to a grandfather. A wife to a friend. A friend to an investigator. An investigator to a court. A court to a community. That is how the revenge worked. Not because I destroyed Grace. Grace destroyed herself with every choice she made. My revenge was refusing to stay inside her story. My revenge was making the paperwork tell the truth. My revenge was taking the property they wanted to sell and turning it into the exact thing Margaret wanted. A place where people like me could bring a suspicious document before love made them sign it. A place where children like Emma would be believed before adults polished the lie. A place where grief could become protection instead of weakness. I still miss my daughter. That is hard to admit. Not the woman in court. Not the woman who drugged cider and wrote scripts for my confusion. I miss the girl with 2 missing teeth who asked if worms had families. I miss the possibility of who she might have been if fear of ordinary life had not turned into greed. But missing someone is not the same as excusing them. Love without truth is just another locked room. I will not live there again. Emma is 11 now. She reads at the front desk on Saturdays and gives every new visitor a bookmark she designed herself. On one side it says Margaret Whittaker Reading House. On the other side, in small letters, it says, "Words do not get sick when you let them out. Beatrice says it is too sentimental." Then she secretly carries 6 in her purse. I am 74. My hands ache when it rains. I forget why I walked into rooms sometimes, which is annoying because now everyone is very polite about it and I have to remind them that forgetting scissors is not the same as signing away a trust. I still audit the reading house accounts every month. Not because I distrust the board. Because Margaret would haunt me over sloppy receipts. And because I know now that protection is not a feeling. It is a practice. You check. You ask. You read. You keep copies. You do not let love make you blind to patterns. If you are listening to this and something in your family feels wrong, do not bury that feeling under politeness. Ask the second question. If someone rushes you to sign, slow down. If a doctor you barely know suddenly becomes central to your finances, ask why. If a relative says they only want to protect you but will not let you read the paper, read it twice. If a child tells you something strange, believe them first. Questions can feel rude. Silence can be dangerous. I learned that late. But I learned it. Margaret once wrote that old houses remember footsteps. I think people do too. I remember Grace's footsteps on the stairs that night outside my room. I remember Emma's bare feet in the hallway. I remember Beatrice crossing the chapel basement with the flashlight. I remember Elena stepping into the parlor and taking the folder from Nolan's hand. Most of all, I remember Margaret's voice telling me not to stay inside their story. I did not. And now, every Tuesday morning, when older people walk into the reading house carrying folders they are scared to open, I see Margaret's work continuing. Not loudly. Not perfectly. But clearly. A woman who was pushed toward silence built a place where other people can speak. A little girl who whispered at dinner learned her voice could save lives. And an old man who almost drank the golden cider learned that revenge does not have to be cruel to be complete. Sometimes the strongest revenge is this. You survive. You prove it. You take back the thing they tried to steal. And you turn it into a door nobody can lock. Thank you for staying with me to the end. If this story made you think of someone who might be unsafe, check on them. Not tomorrow. Today. And if you have ever had to choose between keeping family peace and telling the truth, tell me this. Would you have signed the paper to protect your daughter, or would you have done what I did and let the truth destroy the lie in front of everyone? This story is a fictional dramatization inspired by real issues around elder exploitation, family pressure, and financial abuse. It is not a news report or legal advice. But the warning is real. Read the paper. Believe the child. Ask the second question.